Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. This podcast is dedicated to EAS employees of the U.S. Postal Service and members of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee and join us for today's episode. And now, here's your host, Robert Wakefield.
Good morning, Branch 32, and good morning to our EAS friends all across this great land of ours. Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. I'm your host, Robert Wakefield, president of Branch 32. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, we're glad to have you here today, but now it's time for us to pour that first cup. This March 29th, join us in celebrating a century of trust and a century of service. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union is hosting its 100th annual meeting celebration at the luxurious Sonesta Hotel from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. Mark your calendars for a night of history, festivities, and fun. For more details and updates, like and follow our Facebook page and be a part of this monumental milestone. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union, people helping people since 1925. And in our first cup today, we have a special guest with us, and he's never been on the show before. And actually, he's been on the last four. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Wagner. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing good. I just decided to do an IV of coffee right into my arm. So much easier. just because I'm taking so many notes here, Bob. It's such a great podcast, especially what you're doing on and educating our members on the different postal policies and their rights, especially this involuntary reassignment podcast segment.
Well, it's important because I know it's got to be happening. And because you do training you actually do Zoom training on this very subject, don't you?
Correct, I do. I go through the policies from 1999. Actually, it's from 1989 when we had the posting of those vacancy positions, how they're supposed to have their begin tour, end tour schedules and locations, and then how that, masked into or moved into involuntary reassignments because those schedules were being manipulated.
Exactly.
So very frustrating.
Exactly. It's so frustrating. So we talked about the guidelines and we went through the Dave Williams letter very thoroughly. I hope you'll go back and listen to some of those previous podcasts if you haven't done so. Today, I wanted to talk to you, Brian, about misuses of the policy. What are some of the things that are happening that they are actually misusing the involuntary reassignments?
Well, these aren't long-term. These are like one-offs, or they're like, for an example, I had a case that I handled where the supervisor's day off is every Monday. So he gets Sunday, Monday. Mm-hmm. However, the postmaster was going in every Monday holiday, arbitrarily changing the supervisor's day off to Tuesday. So the supervisor had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and said, hey, that seems great. But technically, by rule, if your day off's on a Monday and the holiday falls on a Monday, what day do you get off? Saturday.
Day off Saturday, yeah.
The supervisor never got a Saturday because there was another supervisor off that day.
Oh.
So instead of bringing that other supervisor in to work tea time, this other supervisor got moved every Tuesday and was missed out on tea time. Now, if he volunteered, a little bit different, but this was happening on a regular basis. Every Monday holiday was arbitrarily done. It's really an involuntary reassignment. It's not even, if you call it temporary, I guess every time a holiday shows up. But that's a manipulation of operations. That wasn't an operational need. It was just a way to avoid paying tea time to an EAS and deny them an opportunity to have at least a Saturday off, and you rotate it. That's about the dignity and respect. Now, if somebody volunteers for that, that's a little different to work. But to arbitrarily take it, that's what I'm going to do to the EAS employee. Those are things that have happened.
I think that happens all the time, Brian. I think that there are people out there that do that on every holiday or any other day that they feel like that they want off. They just bring in the supervisor and not pay him tea time.
Right. Or they're telling you to start later in the day, or they're giving you, and today you're going to take a 2-hour lunch. They've had an hour lunch. Or they start doing that to avoid paying tea time. They're involuntary reassigning you to start later and then give you a later lunch. Instead of paying you for like a 12-hour day, postmaster may come in the morning, start me later in the afternoon or later in the morning, let's say at 10 o'clock. I still work my 8 hours and just backfill or let it go so that I can not be paid the whole time. But these are some issues that we run into. And I was just on a given training with a branch, with a plant where they changed all the craft employees' start times. Okay, understandable. It's an operational change. But then they went in and told all the EAS supervisors, oh, everybody's job's up for bid. I'm like, and then you're going to pick on a dream list what job you want, your dream job list, which one you want.
Oh my God.
I'm like, that's not how that works.
No.
So what you had was supervisors being told you're going to be moved. Now, we understand operational change happened. You try to minimize that by moving 1 or 2 people to meet up if you have to move somebody by an hour or 2 because of operations. But they threw all the jobs up. So that meant somebody who was working mornings finally could work afternoons or whatever it might be. And it wasn't any seniority. It was just, here's the dream list of jobs.
The dream list.
The dream list for a job. That's not the proper way. You should have sat down brought naps in, brought in the EAS. Here's the issue. Here's the jobs. Let's minimize the fewest people possible. It is an operational change because even dealing with carriers starting early or later, you may have to move a supervisor time. Reasonable.
Yeah, that is reasonable. Sure.
Yeah, but these weren't temporary involuntary reassignments. These were permanent.
Okay.
And that in itself, just disrupts the whole dignity and respect part of dealing with EAS.
Right.
And again, I tell them file the grievance, file it or file the complaint.
Yeah. And I don't think, and I'm so glad that you keep bringing that point up, Brian, because a lot of EAS, including myself, until I read your articles, did not even know that was an option to us.
Right. And I tell you what, it's very interesting. I encourage everyone to read the Postal Supervisor magazine and the consultative minutes. All right. Jimmy Warden does a great job on the minutes. And in there was a section about people, post office naps printed in the consultative about post office violating policy. Right.
Yep.
And the post office even referenced in their statement that there is a provision in ELM, what I referenced 652, about filing the grievance, filing the, so you have that option under 652.41. The post office even mentioned that in their reference. That is the action you take. It's, so there are provisions on how to appeal what we would call policy violations.
Right. And that's so important. So what are some of the other scenarios that you've seen in your career of involuntary reassignments that or violations or misuses of the policy?
Well, besides missing the tea time and then trying to expand people's lunch hours to 2 hours when it isn't necessary to avoid paying tea time. And then it just becomes a round robin where supervisors are just moved around between stations and branches without any reason behind it.
Right.
And these are the biggest challenge. Like today because you're under one post office, right? Postmaster, and you have 5 stations of branches. The thought process is, since you're under the main office, I can put you anywhere.
And that happens a lot, Brian. That happens a lot. There are a lot of people that work in these stations that are told today you're going to work in this office, tomorrow you're going to work at that office, tomorrow you're going to have a 4-hour lunch because it's Amazon Sunday and I don't want you staying over that, so I'm going to give you a big, huge break in the middle of the day. And that's not right. That is not what postal policy is.
Right. And I think it would go Well, of course, much better if the postal leadership makes sure that they follow the process under involuntary reassignment. So we even sit down with the EAS who are being impacted and explain why we're doing it, not just because I told you so, and this is I'm running the operation. Mm-hmm. That doesn't bode well in having a good working relationship. Again, under ELM 652.3, and your manager is supposed to help coach and mentor you and provide you the resources you need and help you perform at a higher level of performance.
Correct.
That's, these types of things kind of counter what we're trying to accomplish. We understand in NAPS, there's going to be emergencies. People are going to have to go somewhere in an emergency situation. But every day isn't an emergency when you're being involuntary reassigned to say, oh, okay, I'm being involuntary reassigned to go carry mail in another post office.
Right, exactly. We had an office here in Tennessee where the postmaster would actually change EAS times according to what day it was. Well, now Monday's going to be heavy, and so the carriers are going to be late. So I want you to come in at 10 on Mondays. But Tuesdays are a little bit lighter, so I want you to come in at 6.
Right.
And that is abuse of the policy, isn't it?
That is abuse of the policy. That makes no sense because we're not staffing. If you staff the workload, I'll be honest with you, at one time the post office tried to do for staffing on how many craft employees were in a unit and how many supervisors they're going to have that day.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right. And, the 22-1 or SWIPs or whatever. Oh, you don't have enough this day. You didn't meet the qualifications, so you don't get a supervisor this day. No, that's not how that works.
Right.
But again, we have an involuntary reassignment policy. If you're going to be involuntary reassigned, follow the concept of notifying the EAS. What is the rationale? What is the objective? What is the reasoning? Give them the chance for input, give them plenty of lead time, and it definitely make sure that when that happens, that the NAPS rep is present when it comes time to discussing this with the post office on behalf of the NAPS members so that you can get everybody's buy-in on making sure that at the end of the day, the employees' livelihood isn't totally disrupted and the post office can meet its obligation to the customer.
That's a great way to end this, Brian. Thank you so much for being on this Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. And before we go, I've been asking you every time, I need the flavor of the week.
Well, the flavor of the week this time, Robert, it's been very fun, very challenging, but I think I need to have a little bit stronger coffee. So my ice cream flavor of the day is the Maple Bourbon Blondie. Maple Bourbon Blondie.
Yeah,
I'm definitely going to sleep well tonight.
Yes, you are. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Brian Wagner, the immediate past president of NAPS, and he has Zoom into training, and it's available to all NAPS members. So get a hold of Brian, and he'll be happy to go to your branch wherever you are or do it by Zoom. So it's a great thing. Brian, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Robert, thank you very much. Your podcast is excellent. No wonder it's number one in the country.
It's number one in its niche. What is it? Niche? I don't know what it is. Thank you so much.
Number one in my heart.
Oh, I love that. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thanks, Robert.
See you. For 100 years, that's 36,525 days, 876,600 hours, and over 52 million minutes, the Nashville Post Office Credit Union has been a beacon of financial support for the postal community. Since 1925, we've been here for life's big moments and everyday triumphs. Each day, hour, and minute, we are committed to our mission of people helping people. Join us and be a part of that tradition. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union. People helping people since 1925. And as we pour our second cup of the day, I want to thank Brian Wagner for being my guest over the last few episodes. You may have noticed that like episode, I think it was 13 and 14, they were exactly the same. And the reason that is because, well, I uploaded the same episode. So if you noticed that, thank you for listening twice. That's pretty awesome. Brian does a great job on all these trainings. If you want to contact him, his cell phone number is 309-253-5353, or you can email him at Brian for Naps, and that's Brian, the number 4, and then Naps at AOL.com. Zoom into training, he'll do that for you. He'll also come to any of your branch meetings and do some training for you there. So just contact Brian, and he'll be happy to help you wherever you need it. And I also want to mention that the 85th Tennessee State Convention is going on in April the 24th through the 26th. So if you would like to attend, the forms are there on our website. Branch 32 is the host. So go to napsbranch32.org. The registration form is there. The hotel information is there as well. So you can go in there and do that. And if you like to play golf, they're having a golf tournament on the Thursday. So the information will be there as well. The name of the golf tournament is really cool. It's called the Bob Wakefield Invitational Desert Classic. I like that because, first of all, I don't play golf. And the second thing, I haven't invited anybody. And the other thing is we don't live in a desert. So it's all a misnomer. I think you'll really enjoy the Bob Wakefield Invitational Desert Classic. But be sure to attend the Tennessee State Convention coming up in April. We would love to see you there. All right, well, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for listening to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. You know what to do. You know what the drill is. Be sure to tell all of your EAS friends about this podcast. I sure would appreciate that. And be sure to share it and like it and do all the stuff you're supposed to do. I'm Robert Wakefield. And remember, every great weekend starts with a great cup of Joe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of Robert Wakefield and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. We welcome your questions and comments, so send those to SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com.